The gunshot echoed across the vast Montana wilderness as Temperance Zeller clutched her swollen belly and slid down against a pine tree, her trembling fingers discovering blood seeping through her riding skirt. She was 20 miles from the nearest town, with only her faithful mare who now grazed nervously nearby, while she had fled from the 3 men who'd attacked her homestead and murdered her husband just hours before. Lucas Calloway heard the gunshot while tracking a small herd of wild mustangs through the foothills. At 26, he'd spent half his life on horseback, working ranches across the frontier, but something about that distant crack of a rifle made his spine stiffen. It wasn't hunting season, and this stretch of territory in 1878 was still dangerous enough that gunfire often meant trouble. Temperance bit down on her lip until she tasted copper, fighting back the scream that threatened to escape. The contractions had started 2 hours earlier, far too early at barely 8 months along. She knew what was happening, the stress of witnessing her husband Thomas's murder, the desperate escape on horseback, and the stray bullet that had grazed her side had triggered an early labor. Her water had broken an hour ago, soaking through her undergarments and making her ride even more uncomfortable. "Easy, girl," Lucas whispered to his Appaloosa as they crested a ridge. The mare's ears had perked forward, sensing something beyond the next stand of pines. Lucas drew his revolver and proceeded cautiously, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the forest floor. The first sound that reached him wasn't another gunshot, but something far more startling, the unmistakable whimper of a woman in pain. Temperance couldn't hold back the cry that escaped her lips as a particularly fierce contraction gripped her. 17 hours of labor with her first child 2 years ago hadn't prepared her for giving birth alone in the wilderness while bleeding from a gunshot wound. The memory of little Sarah, left with a neighbor while Temperance had ridden to deliver supplies to Thomas at their new claim, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Would she ever see her daughter again? Lucas dismounted silently, tethering his horse before approaching on foot. The sight that greeted him behind the thick pine made his breath catch. A young woman, no older than 23 by his estimation, her honey-brown hair falling loose around a face contorted in pain. Her riding dress was darkened with blood along one side, and her hands were cradling her very pregnant belly. "Madam," he called softly, holstering his weapon and raising his palms to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you." Temperance's eyes flew open, terror flooding her face before giving way to desperate hope. "Please," she gasped, "I've been shot. The baby's coming. They killed Thomas, they're still looking for me." Lucas crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her. "Who's looking for you?" he asked, already shrugging off his heavy duster coat. "Claim jumpers," she managed between panting breaths. 3 men. They want our land, the gold claim. They killed my husband this morning. Her words dissolved into a moan as another contraction seized her. Lucas assessed the situation quickly. The woman's wound was bleeding steadily but didn't appear to be immediately life-threatening. The bullet had torn through the flesh of her side without hitting anything vital. The greater danger was the birth, happening miles from help, and the men she claimed were pursuing her. "My name is Lucas Calloway. I work at the Double R Ranch about 10 miles east of here," he explained, tearing a strip from his shirt to create a makeshift bandage. "I'm going to help you, madam." "Temperance," she whispered. "Temperance Zeller." As Lucas pressed the cloth against her wound, she seized his arm with surprising strength. "My daughter," she gasped. "Sarah. She's with the Millers at Copper Creek." "If I don't make it, you're going to make it," Lucas interrupted firmly. "Both of you are." The sun was sinking rapidly, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as Lucas worked to make Temperance as comfortable as possible. He'd helped deliver foals and calves before, but never a human baby. The nearest doctor was in Silverton, at least a day's ride away. "The contractions are getting closer," Temperance said, her face pale and shining with sweat. "The baby's coming soon." Lucas nodded, his expression determined. "I've got some clean bandanas in my saddlebag. I'll make a fire, boil some water. We'll manage." As darkness fell, Lucas worked efficiently, gathering firewood and melting snow in his canteen. He unsaddled both horses, using the blankets to create a makeshift bed for Temperance. All the while, he kept his Winchester rifle close at hand, ears attuned to any sound that might signal the approach of the men Temperance had described. The first stars were appearing in the sky when Temperance's labor intensified. Her cries became more frequent, echoing through the trees despite her attempts to remain quiet. Lucas knelt beside her, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. "You need to check," she gasped between contractions. "See if you can see the baby's head." Lucas swallowed hard but nodded. With as much decorum as the situation allowed, he positioned himself to examine her progress. "I can see the crown," he confirmed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Next contraction, you need to push." Temperance nodded, gathering her strength. When the next wave of pain hit, she bore down with all her might, squeezing Lucas's hand until he thought the bones might crack. 3 more pushes, and suddenly the night was pierced by a new sound, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. "It's a boy," Lucas announced, his voice thick with emotion as he caught the slippery infant in his hands. A healthy-looking boy. Tears streamed down Temperance's face as Lucas quickly cleaned the baby with water from his canteen and wrapped him in a clean bandana. The infant's cries grew stronger as Lucas carefully placed him in his mother's arms. "Hello, little one," Temperance whispered, her exhausted face transformed by joy. "Welcome to the world." But the moment of peace was short-lived. Another contraction seized her, and fresh blood soaked through the makeshift bandages on her side. The wound that had slowed its bleeding earlier now pulsed with renewed intensity, likely torn open during the difficult birth. "You're bleeding too much," Lucas said, concern etching deep lines around his eyes. He moved quickly, preparing more bandages, but the blood continued to flow. The newborn, sensing his mother's distress, began to wail more insistently. Temperance's arms trembled as she tried to comfort him, but her strength was fading rapidly. Lucas made a decision. He removed his heavy wool coat and carefully wrapped it around both Temperance and her infant son, creating a warm cocoon against the chilling night air. The coat, worn and weathered from years on the trail, was surprisingly soft against their skin. "I'm going to take care of you both," he promised, settling beside them with his rifle across his knees. "Just rest now." Throughout the night, Lucas kept vigilant watch. The baby cried periodically, hungry and confused, while Temperance drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time she stirred, Lucas helped her position the infant to nurse, then changed her bandages. Alarmed by the amount of blood she continued to lose. By dawn, Lucas knew they couldn't remain where they were. Temperance needed a doctor, and the men she'd fled might still be searching the area. He'd heard nothing during the night to suggest immediate danger, but the forest was vast, and sounds carried strangely among the pines. "Mrs. Zeller," he said softly, rousing her from a fitful sleep. "Temperance, we need to move. Can you ride?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a worrying pallor beneath her naturally fair complexion. "I don't know," she admitted. "But we must. For Sarah. For the baby." "What will you call him?" Lucas asked, helping her to sit up while supporting the infant. A sad smile touched Temperance's lips. "Thomas. After his father." Lucas nodded, respecting the tribute, while feeling an unexpected pang at the reminder of her recent widowhood. He pushed the sensation aside, focusing on the practical matter of getting them to safety. With careful planning, Lucas fashioned a sling for baby Thomas from a spare shirt, securing him against Temperance's chest. He then lifted mother and child onto his Appaloosa, which had the smoother gait of the 2 horses, before mounting Temperance's mare himself. With one hand leading his own horse and the other holding his rifle ready, Lucas started them on the journey towards Silverton. The going was painfully slow. Every jolt of the horse caused Temperance to wince, and twice they had to stop when she nearly fainted. Baby Thomas fussed regularly, his cries sending birds scattering from nearby trees and making Lucas increasingly nervous about attracting attention. By midday, they had covered less than 5 miles. Lucas found a sheltered clearing beside a small stream and helped Temperance dismount. Her dress was soaked with fresh blood, confirming his fears that the wound had reopened during their journey. "We need to rest here a while," he decided, helping her settle against the trunk of a cottonwood. "You've lost too much blood to continue right now." Temperance didn't argue, which concerned Lucas even more. She cradled Thomas against her breast, humming softly to soothe his hungry cries. Lucas busied himself collecting water, preparing a small fire, and setting snares in the hope of catching something for their dinner. As the afternoon wore on, Lucas found himself watching Temperance with increasing admiration. Despite her injury and exhaustion, she tended to her newborn son with gentle determination, her love for the child evident in every touch and whispered word. "You have a daughter waiting?" Lucas asked as he offered her a cup of willow bark tea he'd brewed to help with the pain. Temperance nodded, accepting the cup with trembling hands. "Sarah, she's just turned 2. I left her with our neighbors when I went to bring supplies to Thomas at our new claim." Her voice caught. "We found gold 3 weeks ago, just enough to finally buy that little house in town I'd been dreaming of. A place where the children could go to school." Lucas listened intently, piecing together her story. "The men who attacked you, they knew about the claim?" "Thomas was too trusting," she said, a flash of anger momentarily replacing the grief in her eyes. "He mentioned our find to a man at the assayer's office. The next morning, 3 riders appeared at our camp. They shot Thomas before he could even stand up from the fire." Her voice broke. "I was gathering water at the creek. They didn't see me at first. I managed to get to my horse, but one of them fired as I rode away." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Would you recognize these men again?" "Yes," she said firmly. "The leader had a scar across his chin. Called himself Benson. The others called him Boss." Lucas stiffened, recognition flashing across his face. "Wade Benson, you know him?" Temperance asked, hope and fear mingling in her expression. "He's made a name for himself from Montana to Colorado. Claim jumping, cattle rustling, stage robberies." Lucas's voice hardened. "The law's been after him for years, but he keeps slipping away." As night fell again, Lucas made their camp as comfortable as possible. He'd managed to snare 2 rabbits, which now roasted over their small fire. The rich aroma reminded Temperance how long it had been since she'd eaten properly. Baby Thomas seemed more settled after nursing steadily throughout the afternoon, now sleeping peacefully in the crook of her arm. "You should sleep," Lucas suggested, noting her drooping eyelids. "I'll keep watch." "You can't stay awake forever, Mr. Calloway," she murmured, even as she fought to keep her eyes open. "Lucas," he corrected gently. "And I've gone 3 days without sleep breaking horses before. One night's nothing." Despite her protests, Temperance soon drifted off, her breathing finally settling into a rhythm that suggested true rest rather than unconsciousness. Lucas wrapped his coat more securely around her and the baby before moving to sit with his back against a nearby tree, rifle across his lap, and eyes scanning the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. The night passed without incident, but Lucas grew increasingly concerned about Temperance's condition. Though the bleeding had slowed, she remained alarmingly weak, and a flush had begun to color her cheeks that suggested the onset of fever. By morning, his fears were confirmed. Temperance's skin burned beneath his touch, and her eyes were unnaturally bright when she opened them. "We need to get you to a doctor today," he stated, helping her drink from his canteen. "The baby," she began, "is doing fine," Lucas assured her, glancing at the sleeping infant. "It's you I'm worried about." Abandoning any attempt at stealth, Lucas decided their best course was speed. He fashioned a travois from pine branches and his coat, creating a sled-like contrivance that could be pulled behind his horse. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would allow Temperance to lie flat with the baby secure beside her. They set out as soon as the travois was ready, moving faster now that Temperance wasn't struggling to stay upright in the saddle. Lucas led them along game trails he knew would eventually connect with the main road to Silverton, all the while remaining alert for any sign of Benson and his men. The sun had passed its zenith when Lucas heard the sound of approaching horses. He reacted instantly, drawing both mounts off the trail and into a dense thicket of aspens. Temperance, delirious with fever, muttered something that made Lucas lean down and gently cover her mouth with his hand. "Shoo," he whispered. "Someone's coming." Through the pale trunks of the aspens, Lucas watched 3 riders pass along the trail. The man in front matched Temperance's description, exactly broad-shouldered with a prominent scar bisecting his chin. Wade Benson. The notorious outlaw was scanning the ground as he rode, clearly looking for tracks. Lucas held his breath, grateful for the soft forest floor that had partially concealed their trail. The men passed within 30 feet of their hiding place, but the thick spring foliage kept them hidden from view. Only when the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely did Lucas release his hold on Temperance's mouth. Was it them? She asked, her voice barely audible. Yes, Lucas confirmed grimly. But they're headed away from Silverton. We should be safe if we keep moving. By late afternoon, Temperance's condition had deteriorated further. She no longer responded to Lucas's attempts to rouse her, and baby Thomas's cries went unanswered. Lucas gathered the infant into a sling across his chest, keeping one hand on the child while guiding the horses with the other. The sun was setting when Lucas finally spotted the smoke from Silverton's chimneys rising above the next ridge. Relief flooded through him as he urged the tired horses forward. They crested the hill just as the town's lamplighter was beginning his evening rounds, the golden glow of oil lamps appearing one by one along the main street. Lucas's arrival caused an immediate stir. A woman with an infant strapped to his chest and an unconscious, blood-soaked young mother on a makeshift travois was not a common sight, even in a frontier town accustomed to strange occurrences. "I need the doctor," Lucas shouted as townspeople began to gather. "This woman's been shot, and she's just had a baby out in the wilderness." Dr. Elijah Moorfield, Silverton's only physician, emerged from the crowd, his sleeves already rolled up as if expecting trouble. He took one look at Temperance and began issuing orders to the bystanders. "Get her to my surgery immediately. Mrs. Peterson, I'll need your help with the infant. Sheriff, you might want to hear this man's story." The next hours passed in a blur for Lucas. He explained the situation to Sheriff Malcolm Turner, a grizzled veteran of the frontier who knew Wade Benson's reputation all too well. While the doctor worked to save Temperance's life, Lucas found himself being questioned about every detail of the attack and their subsequent journey. "You did right bringing her here," the sheriff concluded. "Benson's been a thorn in my side for 2 years now. If we can catch him red-handed, we might finally put an end to his operations." "What about her daughter?" Lucas asked, suddenly remembering little Sarah waiting at the miller's home. "Someone needs to fetch her from Copper Creek." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "I'll send a deputy first thing tomorrow. For now, let's see if her mama's going to pull through." It was past midnight when Dr. Moorfield finally emerged from his surgery, wiping blood from his hands with a towel. Lucas, who had refused to leave despite the sheriff's suggestion he get some rest at the hotel, jumped to his feet. "She's alive," the doctor said before Lucas could ask. But it was close. The bullet wound itself wasn't too serious, but she lost a lot of blood, and there's infection setting in. The next 48 hours will tell the tale. "And the baby?" A smile creased the doctor's weathered face. "Healthy as can be, considering his dramatic entrance into the world. Mrs. Peterson has taken him home for the night. She's what nursed half the babies in this county at one time or another." Relief made Lucas's knees weak, and he sank back onto the bench outside the surgery. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a moment. She needs rest more than anything now." Lucas entered the small room quietly. Temperance lay still on the examination table, her honey-brown hair spread across the pillow, her face almost as white as the sheet covering her. Lucas approached slowly, taking in the clean bandages visible at the edge of the sheet and the slow rise and fall of her chest. "Thank you." The whisper was so faint Lucas thought he might have imagined it, but then Temperance's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on his face. "You saved us," she murmured. Lucas shook his head. "You did the hard part," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I just provided the transportation." A ghost of a smile touched her lips before her eyes slid closed again. Dr. Moorfield appeared at Lucas's elbow, gesturing toward the door. "Let her sleep now. You can come back in the morning." The next few days established a routine. Lucas took a room at the modest Silverton Hotel, but spent most of his waking hours at the doctor's office. When Temperance was sleeping, which was often as her body fought the infection, he would visit baby Thomas at the Peterson home or confer with Sheriff Turner about the search for Benson and his men. On the third day, the sheriff's deputy returned from Copper Creek with little Sarah Zeller in tow. The sight of the toddler, with her mother's honey-brown hair and solemn blue eyes, struck Lucas like a physical blow. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee, introducing himself to the shy child who clung to the deputy's leg. "Your mama's been asking for you," he said gently. "Would you like to see her?" Sarah nodded, regarding Lucas with the wary curiosity unique to children. When he offered his hand, she surprised him by taking it without hesitation, her tiny fingers wrapping trustingly around his calloused palm. The reunion between mother and daughter brought tears to even the stoic doctor's eyes. Temperance, still weak but improving, wept openly as she embraced her little girl. When Mrs. Peterson arrived with baby Thomas, the family was complete, gathered around the sickbed in a tableau of resilience that moved Lucas deeply. As the days passed and Temperance's strength gradually returned, Lucas found reasons to remain in Silverton. He took odd jobs breaking horses for the livery stable and helping rebuild a barn that had burned the previous winter. Each evening, he would visit Temperance and the children, often bringing small gifts: a carved wooden horse for Sarah, a soft rabbit fur blanket for Thomas, wildflowers gathered from the meadow outside town for their mother. A week after their arrival in Silverton, Sheriff Turner received word that a posse from Copper Creek had intercepted Benson and his men as they attempted to register Thomas Zeller's gold claim as their own. There had been a shootout, and while one of Benson's companions had escaped, Benson himself and the third man were now in custody, awaiting trial for murder. "They'll hang," the sheriff told Lucas bluntly. "The evidence is clear, and Benson's wanted in 3 territories. No judge will show mercy." The news brought Temperance a measure of peace, though the loss of her husband remained a wound far deeper than the one that had nearly taken her life. When Lucas delivered the update, she reached for his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "I never thanked you properly," she said, her voice stronger now than it had been in days. "You didn't just save my life and Thomas's. You've been looking after Sarah, arranging for our care, staying when you could have continued on your way." Lucas found himself unusually tongue-tied, his customary plain-spokenness deserting him. "Anyone would have done the same," he managed finally. Temperance's eyes, the blue a shade darker than her daughter's, held as steadily. "No, not anyone. You're a good man, Lucas Calloway." 2 more weeks passed. Temperance recovered enough to move from the doctor's office to a small room above the milliner's shop that the townswomen had prepared for her and the children. Lucas continued finding work around Silverton, never quite admitting to himself that his reluctance to leave had nothing to do with job opportunities. It was Sarah who brought matters to a head. The little girl had grown attached to Lucas, running to meet him whenever he appeared and demanding to be lifted onto his shoulders. One evening, as he was reading her a bedtime story while Temperance nursed baby Thomas, Sarah looked up at him with those solemn blue eyes. "Are you going to be my new papa?" she asked, the question so direct and innocent that Lucas nearly dropped the book. He glanced at Temperance, whose cheeks had flushed a becoming pink, though she kept her eyes carefully fixed on her nursing son. "That's not something I can decide by myself, little one," Lucas answered carefully. "That would be up to your mama." Sarah turned expectantly toward her mother. "Mama, can Lucas be our papa now? Thomas needs a papa too." Temperance finally raised her eyes to meet Lucas's, embarrassment mingling with something softer in her expression. "Sarah, that's not how these things work. Mr. Calloway has his own life, his own plans." "Actually," Lucas said, surprising himself with his boldness, "my plans have been changing lately." That evening, after Sarah had finally fallen asleep and baby Thomas was settled in his cradle, Lucas and Temperance sat together on the small porch behind the milliner's shop. The summer night was warm, crickets chirping in the flower beds and stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "I hope Sarah didn't make you uncomfortable," Temperance began, her hands fidgeting with the folds of her skirt. "She didn't," Lucas assured her. "Children have a way of seeing things clearly sometimes." Temperance glanced at him questioningly. "What things?" Lucas took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I know it's too soon. Your husband's only been gone a short while, and you're still recovering. But I want you to know that I'd like to stay in Silverton, to be near you and the children, if you'll allow it." Temperance's eyes widened. "Lucas, I'm not asking for promises," he hurried to add. "Just time. Time to see if what I'm feeling might someday be returned." Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant piano music drifting from the saloon on Main Street. Lucas waited, his heart hammering against his ribs like a wild thing seeking escape. When Thomas died, Temperance finally said, her voice soft but steady, "I thought my heart died with him. These past weeks, caring for the children has been all that kept me going." She paused, then tentatively reached out to place her hand over his. "But lately, I found myself looking forward to your visits, wondering what you might think about things. Noticing the way Sarah lights up when you're near. Hope surged through Lucas, warm and bright. I never expected to find a family, he admitted. Been a drifter most of my life. But meeting you, helping bring Thomas into the world, getting to know Sarah. It's changed something in me. Temperance's fingers tightened around his. I can't make any promises either, she said. It's too soon, as you said. But I'd like you to stay in Silverton too. To give us all time. Under the star-filled Montana sky, that was enough. More than enough to plant the seeds of what might grow, in time, into something beautiful and lasting. 1 year later, the town of Silverton gathered to witness the wedding of Lucas Calloway and Temperance Zeller. Sarah, now 3, scattered wildflower petals along the church aisle with solemn concentration, while baby Thomas, sturdy and cheerful at 1 year old, was held by Mrs. Peterson in the front pew. As Lucas placed a simple gold band on Temperance's finger, his mind flashed back to that night in the wilderness, her blood soaking through his makeshift bandages, the newborn's cries piercing the darkness, his coat wrapped around them both as he kept vigilant watch. From that moment of desperation had grown love, family, and a future brighter than either of them could have imagined. I do, Temperance said clearly, her blue eyes shining with tears of joy rather than pain this time. And as Lucas bent to kiss his bride, he silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him to follow the sound of a gunshot through the Montana pines that spring day, changing the course of all their lives forever.